It's so good to see everyone enjoying color. We walk out our doors and see color everywhere, in nature, clothing and shops, food, the list goes on and on. Some of us are more comfortable with it than others, but what makes color so amazing in our spinning? Namely, it's the amazing yarns that we can create. We can custom blend our own fibers to create unique one-of-a-kind yarns that become sweaters and garments. The possibilities for spinning singles and plying are endless. Taking what we learned in part 1 of Spinning Pearls this month, let's apply our learning to some samples that I prepared and spun up. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, it is linked in the description box below, regardless of whether you are watching here on YouTube or over on Patreon. That is for patrons of the show. I would recommend watching through part 1 first so that you don't miss anything, and then come back and watch this after if you're a patron of the show. Don't worry, I'll wait. For everybody else, this is part 2 of a Spinning Pearls segment that we release throughout the months over at Wool and Spinning over on Patreon. I hope that you will consider joining us. Remember that to be able to see all of the posts that are available to you each month, please have a look at the Ketchup and Pickles housekeeping post for January of 2023 that will be released around the middle of the month. It will have all the links that you need to navigate all the things that you wish to engage in. Links to the indices for all of the vlogs and PDFs, previous episodes of Wool and Spinning Radio, as well as the new ones, and the Wool Circle are linked there for you as well. You can find all of that in the description box below. All right, let's get into it. So earlier this month, we briefly introduced color and defined some terms. From there, we explored hue families, value, and saturation. Now we are going to take that theory and apply it to our spinning. What happens when we add white, black, and gray to our fibers and spin them? I started with a cyan-ish blue and combined it to create 3 little samples, but our community participants from within this wool and spinning community did even more. I can't wait to share that with you, what they created. It's just unbelievable. So first, let's pick up where we left off earlier this month with the photo that was from my Ravelry projects page. So I had shared in part one of Spinning Pearls this month the colors that were generated from my Ravelry projects page, with some reflections mentioning that I would expound on this in the next episode of Spinning Pearls. So let's do that now. So the barley corn is part of the hue family yellow, while the Roman coffee is part of the hue family red. We don't know what the original colors were, but they have probably had gray added to them. Another way to verbalize that is that both white and black have been added. They are both of medium value because they are quite similar. When you put the photos into grayscale, the barley corn is 1 or 2 values lighter in comparison to the Roman coffee, which is right in the center. After discussing all of this with my mom, we both agreed that these aren't shades because they would be stronger and darker. As well, the barley corn would be more green because when black is added to yellow, it becomes green. So this makes these colors tonals, and they are actually quite neutral because in today's world, neutrals aren't just black, white, and gray as previously. If the Roman coffee had more black added, it would go very, very dark. So the terms chroma, saturation, intensity are interchangeable, and they refer to the quality of light in a color. We use intensity to distinguish a brighter tone of color from a duller tone of color. When we have a high degree of saturation or strength, the color will have no gray. It will be just pure color. Again, white makes lighter and not as intense color, while black darkens the color and also causes it to lose some of its intensity as well. Finally, gray creates color that is less bright, but it doesn't get darker or lighter. Therefore, it stays the same value. We will explore this a bit more in a moment. So how can we apply this learning then? When white is added to a hue, the piece immediately lightens, becoming a tint. When black is added, the hue immediately darkens and intensifies, becoming a shade. Finally, when gray is added, the hue immediately becomes muted and dull, but remains the same value and is described as a tone. This is really powerful because so often we look at our hand spun and think, I need to put something with this so that I have enough yardage to knit or weave my project. Whichever neutral you choose, white, black, or gray, will determine whether your resulting handspun yarn is lightened, darkened, or dulled. The choice is yours to make alone and based on what your vision for your project is and what you are hoping to create. This makes me think of those yarns we've all spun and been surprised by when the resulting skein is dull and muted. If a photo is taken of the yarn, it would register as the same value as the fiber prior to spinning, but it just lacks any pizzazz or wonder. It's now dull and muted. This might be for any number of reasons. Brown created from fibers dyed on the same staple in red, blue, and yellow, and then spun, which creates a dull, muted kind of gray-brown color, or white and dark mixing to create grays, or gray being present in a large proportion in the fiber of the braid. Value is really important when we are designing for our final projects. Value has the ability to create a focal point within our work because our eye is immediately drawn to the light area contrasted against the dark area. So this creates interest. It also creates the illusion of depth and three-dimensionality when gradations of the value are used from light through dark. I think it is important to explore how we create changes in value and saturation at the wheel. We haven't done this type of exercise before, and it's fascinating to be able to do this and share it with you. So we will start with as pure a color as possible, changing its value by adding gray, and then we will look at saturation by adding white and black. There are a few ways to dull or mute a color without changing the value, but we will explore that as the year goes on. And one way is to add equal amounts of white and black, i.e. gray. So to accomplish this exercise, I searched my stash for a color that would show well, would photograph and spin nicely. So let's explore what I discovered. So because I used what I had access to from my stash, I focused on finding a primary color from either the CMY or the RYB color wheel. In the end, I chose a blue that closely mimics the CMY primary cyan or turquoise. It's not perfect, but it's close, and it's the closest I had in my stash to a primary. Apparently, I don't purchase much primary analogous fiber. My encouragement here is to dig through your stash and see if you can duplicate these exercises yourself and share your findings along with photos so that I can pay it forward and share them next month. So don't forget to tag me. So I didn't measure these color samples, but instead I used this as a place to start. The mix of color and the tint, shade, and tone is approximately 70-30, but it's far, far from exact. I would encourage you to do some experiments by starting with 100% hue and moving to 90-10 hue and tint, tone, or shade, all the way to 90-10 tint, tone, and shade to hue. To 100% tint, tone, and shade. And then you can see what all of those skeins look like lined up, all 10 of them sort of along that spectrum, or that scale, from 100% hue all the way across to whichever you choose, your tint, tone, or shade. So 100% hue, here it would be the cyan, all the way across to 100% black or 100% gray or 100% white. So everything in between would be like 60-40, 50-50, and so on, and it would be really enlightening. So these are just my observations, but the tint skein is light and slightly brighter. The cyan loses its saturation and instead becomes almost pastel due to its lightness. More tint would have resulted in an even lighter skein. It ends up being a higher value. In contrast, the black has the opposite effect and creates a darker skein. Of the three skeins, this skein is the most remarkable and interesting, in my opinion. The black tends to really take over, and just a little bit in paint is needed to add shade. Be aware of this when you're blending fibers as well. Lastly, the tone is interesting. It didn't change to the untrained eye. It looks like pure cyan in some ways, but the value is the same as the original fiber. But knowing where we started, we can see that the cyan is now muted and dulled, and it's lost much of its saturation. So as expected, the value didn't change. Against the grayscale photo of the original fiber next to the blended fiber with gray, they are the same. The skein is more, that photo is available in the PDF that is available with this content for our co-executive producers. The skein is more muted and it's slightly leaning more towards being a neutral. There is no moodiness in the skein like we see in the shade, and there's no brightness from the tint. Instead, it's just moved along a horizontal axis towards slightly dulled and muted. More gray would have emphasized this even more. And if you are exploring these exercises yourself, I would encourage you to use as neutral a gray as possible, meaning one that has equal parts white and black. The true fun comes when you start to play with these percentages. So we explored some of this in our MASM study that Katrina died for us back in 2019. I have been slowly unlocking some of these old videos and PDF downloads for you to enjoy, since it's been years since this stuff was released, and I hope you enjoy it. That is all linked for you down below. So in the MASM study, we looked at how white affected the control colorway and repeated the exercise for black's effect. It was a very cool study, and it really illustrated how black can completely take over when given the opportunity. Less is more with black. So let's get into the community samples. They will take your breath away. So each month I will be putting out a call to the community for their interpretations on color. This month I reached out on the Slack channel as well as the Ravelry group and asked for the following. We will be introducing the color wheel, defining tints, shades, and tones. If you can dig into your stash and find a primary color or dye some fiber on fiber, doesn't matter what fiber, wool, silk, cotton, etc., just no blends, please. Next, find white, black, and gray in your stash. Creating small nests of fiber, either carded, combed, or hand blended, spin up your little samples, approximately 5 grams each. Take photos and send me a reflection of what you did, your reflections and observations and learnings, and what surprised you, if anything. The response this month was completely overwhelming. So to add to our conversation around color this month, this little vlog is a chance to share with you what others learned. I hope you really enjoy this. So first we'll hear from Malin, who shares with us her amazing experiment with green merino wool with white, which was a mystery, gray, which was Jamtland, and blackish, she called it, which was from Zwartbols. This is her work here. So Malin says, I started by mixing green merino wool 50-50 with white, which was a mystery, gray, Jamtland, and blackish, which was Zwartbols wool. I then repeated everything, very small amounts, with red and blue. The colors are not perfectly blended, mostly because the staple lengths in some cases were very different, especially the gray, which was much longer. In general, I found it interesting that the white blends look non-saturated rather than the typical baby colors like pink or baby blue, and also how dull the gray blends looked compared to the black blends. Thank you so much, Malin, for sharing. Florence did another deep dive as well into her color study and shares the following. Spinning 5 grams of fiber in each sample, my first skein was 5 grams red, next was 4 grams red with 1 gram white, and so on through to 5 grams white. To the other side was 4 grams of red with 1 gram of black to 5 grams of black. So she went all the way through. The blended fibers with the 20% variation have created a beautiful visual range that immediately made me think of color work. Interestingly, the 5 gram white and 5 gram black on the ends of the scale did not belong visually. Knowing that viewing the yarns as a grayscale was an excellent way to plan color work palettes, I did this and was really surprised at what I saw. On the white side, the gradation was clear, and on the black side, there was very little visual difference. Another photograph, another grayscale, this time just the 5 grams of red beside the 5 grams of black, and they showed up as being incredibly similar. My black is a natural fleece, so while it is very dark fiber, it is not a true black, and I wondered if that was why the scale looked so similar. Another photograph, another gray scale, this time using some dyed mohair to see if it made a difference, but it shows it's effectively the same. I was having such fun, I repeated the process with blue fiber. So on the color scale, it looks very similar to the red, but the gray scale gave a very different result. Further playing is required. Thank you so much, Florence. This next one is from Greta Lynn, who shares about her little samples that she created for this project. Made my little skeins this week on the wheel and then used an Andean plying bracelet. I plied them right up. It was fast and fun, and I love how I could, quote, feel the difference with the beads happening in each braid. The darkest one with all the black Icelandic tog is so much longer than the rest. I didn't measure anything, just eyeballed it on my hand cards. So even though gray seems less strong than the black, it really takes the yellow's intensity or its saturation down, while the black just changes its value. Thanks, Greta Lynn. So this next one is from Evelyn, who shares her yellow experiments as well. I blended using hand cards, and the blends are all yellow and then 2/3 yellow with 1/3 of the other, and then a third yellow with 2/3 of the other, and then all of the other. So she's got all of her skeins here. Yellow is Corriedale Sliver and the white is Corriedale top, where the gray is Merino and the black was some Shetland top. The white, gray, and black are all natural sheep colors. I love the Shetland blend since the black is not a true black, it's a very dark brown instead, and it makes the yellow turn into gold, and it's still a very warm color. My observations are that the gray tried to separate from the yellow, so that should have been blended a bit better, and the white blends are the most subtle, but I love the black blends the most. It's interesting that Evelyn said that, because I found the black added to my projects was the most interesting as well. It created the most interest, the most depth, the most je ne sais quoi. It was just, yeah, the most interesting to look at, a little bit more textured, a little bit more visually interesting, really fascinating. This is from Peggy. She did a couple of different experiments here, and she shared on her Ravelry projects page about her experiments. This is a study in primary color with the tone, tint, and shades variation. My Corriedale fleece was from a shearing day several years ago, scoured and dyed with red RIT dye with grandkids in a portable roaster as picked fleece. I hand carded several roll legs of about 3 grams each. Then I used 3 grams of natural white, gray, and black commercially prepared roving from my stash. For the first experiment, I spun 6 grams of the purest red fleece supported long draw. I must admit this was from one of my first attempts of home processing. I hope I have learned over the past several years, as there are lots of neps from the dyed fleece. I likely didn't choose the best from the 12-pound ram fleece. That's a lot of fleece, Peggy. There is still more awaiting my attention. So each of these, the tone, the tint, and the shade, I hand carded equal parts of the modifying color, applying alternating thin layers of each color, then carding until the roll leg was well blended. All roll legs were spun supported long draw for a quick spin, giving a rustic yarn. For each 5 to 6 grams single was caked and plied from both ends of the cake. Next will be a similar experiment with hand-dyed, commercially processed Cheviot ram fleece, likely using a different approach. My favorite result is the hand-carded blended roll legs for the most even color modifying results. Amazing. Thank you so much, Peggy, for sharing all of your findings. This is from Dion, who took some of the learnings from Katrina's talk on the wool circle with Rebecca, and she actually applied it to her photography by taking photos in cool and warm light. Note the immense difference. So here was her process. I'm using all Corriedale except for the gray, which is Romney. I've actually noticed something while I was doing the blending that affects the resulting color. The purple I used is commercially carded fiber, and I hand carded it with the other 3. Well, the pre-carded fiber was a very short staple length, almost as if they cut it short. When blended, it's as if the purple is more encased in the longer fibers. And when I spun some, I noticed that you can see some separation in the white. Spun samples to come. So these are Dion's spun samples here, and you can see on the bottom how different the color looks under the warm light. That's the bottom on the left there. Very, very interesting. Thank you, Dion, for sharing. And finally, last but certainly not least, from Sam, she shared her amazing experiments with magenta and the addition of black. So again, not too much difference in the middle. Then all of a sudden, the black completely takes over. So here's what she noted. The fibers are red Shetland and black merino. I chose to make them all 5 grams in total. So going from the plain red clockwise are 4 red to 1 black, 3 red to 2 black, 2 red to 2 black, and then reverse. 2 red to 3 black, 1 red to 4 black, and then 5 black. I'm hoping to spindle spin them all to see how they turn out. The middle 3 do not look much different on the photo, but there is a slight difference in daylight. I have been waiting for a bright day to photograph these, but that's not going to happen. So here are my samples. That's a problem with living where we live. Hey, Sam, she's in Wales. I'm in southwestern British Columbia, and it's the same problem. We get these like awful days where you don't get enough light. So there's not much difference in the middle 3 until you get to the red and the black between them, and then you see it. It's very subtle. However, I love the 1 red to 4 black and the 4 red to 1 black. They rock. I might try and knit them up just to see how they look in fabric. I think those ones are probably the most interesting because they have the most contrast, and they're slightly textured, and they give you depth, and there's light and dark in there. It's really fantastic. So thank you so much to everybody who shared. So I put out ideas to the group in the middle of December, and the results could have generated a book. The ingenuity and knowledge behind these experiments, showing their learning and showcasing their experiments, warmed my heart. I hope you learned a lot seeing their ideas in action. It's equally amazing how everyone interpreted the instructions differently, and yet, the knowledge of color that each learned comes through. Black takes over and it darkens, white lightens and brightens, gray dulls and mutes. Those are the major principles to take away from this, and from there we can build on the next ideas like optical mixing and color contrasts. and creating that elusive thing that we spinners talk about called mud. Coming next month, I can't wait to share. See you then. As always, share your findings with us either on the Slack channel under #general or in the Ravelry group. Be sure to share your projects, your spins, and your makes using #woolenspinning so that others can see your work as well. And don't hesitate to tag me and Rebecca so that we can see your stuff. Thank you so much. Until next time, happy spinning and happy experimenting. Bye everyone.